This is the complete Old Republic era. 10,000 years of Star Wars history that most people will never know exists. Jedi so powerful they could crack planets. Sith empires that made Palpatine look like a student. Wars so catastrophic they nearly ended civilization itself. Not once, not twice, but over and over again. This is the story that came before the movies. The real deep lore, the legends. And tonight, it's going to carry you to sleep. So get comfortable, turn the lights down, because we're going back to the very beginning. Let's start at the absolute beginning. Not the Clone Wars, not the Sith rule of two, not even the founding of the Jedi Order as you know it. We're going back further than almost anyone ever talks about, to a time so ancient that the Force itself was barely understood. The story begins on a planet called Tython. Tython sits in a region of space called the Deep Core, the dense, chaotic heart of the galaxy, where hyperspace lanes are almost impossible to navigate. It is, by its very nature, a place that does not want to be found. And for most of galactic history, it wasn't. But roughly 36,000 years before Luke Skywalker blew up the Death Star, a group of beings arrived on Tython. Some accounts say they were brought by mysterious starships called the Tho-Yor, enormous pyramid-shaped vessels that drifted across the galaxy and collected Force-sensitive beings from dozens of different worlds, then deposited them all on this one planet, as if guided by the Force itself. Imagine that. Waking up on an alien world, surrounded by strangers who speak different languages, who look nothing like you, who come from cultures you've never heard of. And the only thing you all have in common is this invisible energy that you can feel pulsing through everything. These beings called themselves the Jedi. Now, the Jedi were not the Jedi. Not yet. The philosophy was different. Where the Jedi Order we know from the movies preaches the light side, serenity, the suppression of emotion, the Jedi believed something far more interesting. They believed in balance, not light, not dark, both in equal measure. The Force on Tython was unusually volatile. It responded to the emotional and spiritual state of whoever was channeling it. If a Jedi fell too far into the darkness, if they gave themselves over to rage, passion, hatred, the planet itself would begin to punish them. Storms would erupt, the ground would shake, the living force around them would sicken. But here's the fascinating part. The same thing would happen if they went too far into the light. Too much peace, too much serenity, too much detachment, and Tython would respond with equal hostility. The planet demanded balance. The Force demanded balance. And so the Jedi built their civilization around that principle. They constructed 9 great temples across Tython, each dedicated to a different aspect of Force knowledge. Akar-Kesh, the Temple of Balance, the most sacred of all. Mahara-Kesh, the Temple of Healing. Kaleth, the Temple of Knowledge. Padawan-Kesh, where students learned. And so on, each one a center of learning, of philosophy, of Force study. Jedi who wandered too far toward the dark were sent on a pilgrimage to Bogan, one of Tython's 2 moons, the Dark One, to meditate until they found their center again. Those who drifted too far into the light were sent to the opposite moon, Ashla, for the same purpose. For thousands of years, this worked. The Jedi Order thrived. They were warrior scholars, Force users who were as comfortable meditating in a temple as they were on a battlefield. They spread their knowledge and their culture across Tython's continents. They had conflicts, internal ones, philosophical ones, even some violent ones, but broadly speaking, this was an era of growth and learning. and then the Infinite Empire arrived. And let me be specific about what I mean when I say the planet punished them. We're not talking about emotional metaphors here. Tython's connection to the Force was so raw and so direct that imbalance in its inhabitants would literally cause environmental disasters. Jedi who fell too deep into the darkness would find themselves at the center of electrical storms that seemed to follow them. Crops would die around them. Wounds would refuse to heal. The Force wasn't just the universe's background hum on Tython. It was an active participant in daily life, moody and responsive, like a parent who knows when you're lying. This made the Jedi hyper-aware of their own internal states, in a way that the later Jedi Order largely wasn't. A Jedi of the Republic era was taught to suppress their emotions, to remain still, centered, untouched. A Jedi was taught to feel everything and then find the center point. The difference is subtle but profound. One approach produces monks. The other produces something more like artists, people who know the full range of the emotional spectrum because they've had to navigate it consciously, deliberately, every day. The Jedi were a remarkable civilization. They built observatories that tracked not just the stars, but the flow of the Force through celestial bodies. They developed arts of healing through the Force that would influence Jedi medicine for thousands of years afterward. They trained with blades, early versions of the tech blade and later the proto-lightsaber, but also with the Force directly, learning to shape it with their minds and bodies in ways that were almost dance-like. And they were content, broadly speaking, remote, unknown, left alone by a galaxy that hadn't yet found them, the Rakata. You may have encountered them if you ever played Knights of the Old Republic. They are one of the most terrifying civilizations in all of Star Wars lore, and in this ancient age, they were the undisputed masters of the galaxy. The Rakata were a species of Force-sensitive amphibious beings with large craniums, cold intelligence, and an absolute appetite for conquest. They had built something called the Infinite Empire, a civilization of over 500 worlds, all of them enslaved. They achieved faster-than-light travel, not through conventional hyperdrives, but through Force-powered technology. Their starships were driven by the dark side of the Force itself. Their weapons, their computers, their infrastructure, all of it ran on Force energy harvested from suffering and death. They were, in a word, monsters. And for tens of thousands of years, they had been the dominant power in the galaxy. They conquered dozens of species. They enslaved the ancestors of humans. They built enormous automated factories called star forges, massive space stations that could create fleets of ships using Force energy and raw stellar matter to arm their endless campaigns. When the Rakata turned their attention toward Tython and its Jedi, they were not worried. They had crushed empires before. They had enslaved gods. But Tython was different. The Jedi fought back. The Despot War, as some scholars called the initial conflict, wasn't purely a war against the Rakata at first. It began as an internal conflict among the Jedi themselves, sparked by a charismatic and dangerously powerful Force user named Zendor, who rejected the Jedi philosophy of balance and began openly using only the dark side. He called his followers the Legions of Letau, and they were formidable. The Jedi defeated them, but the conflict opened wounds. And when the Rakata arrived in force, drawn by the concentration of Force energy on Tython, the Jedi discovered something disturbing. The Force-based technology of the Infinite Empire was powered exclusively by the dark side. The Rakata couldn't perceive or use the light side of the Force at all. They were beings of pure, dark side energy. The war that followed, called the Force Wars of Tython, was one of the foundational conflicts of galactic history. Jedi who were able to maintain balance were powerful, but the conflict itself pushed everyone to extremes. You can't fight a dark side empire for years and remain perfectly centered. Slowly, inevitably, the Jedi who survived were the ones who leaned into the light side, because it was the light side that the Rakata couldn't counter. It was the one weapon the Infinite Empire had no answer for. The Jedi won. The Rakata were driven from Tython, but the Jedi Order was transformed forever. Those who had leaned into the light during the war didn't return to balance when the war ended. They stayed in the light. They were the survivors. They were the ones with all the experience, all the wisdom, all the scars. Their philosophy became the dominant philosophy. And from them, the Jedi were born. The Jedi, the guardians of peace and justice, students of the light side of the Force. It happened gradually, over centuries. The organization reformed, the philosophy codified, the name changed. The temples on Tython were eventually abandoned, and the Jedi spread outward into the galaxy, first to Ossus, which would become their primary home for thousands of years, and then to dozens of other worlds. The Rakata, meanwhile, were undone by something even more terrifying than any army. A plague, possibly engineered by their slaves, possibly a natural consequence of their reliance on the dark side, swept through the Infinite Empire and severed their connection to the Force. Without Force-powered technology, their civilization collapsed virtually overnight. Their fleet stopped working. Their star forges went dark. 500 worlds thrown into chaos. The Infinite Empire didn't fall to a heroic rebellion. It fell to a disease. And in the power vacuum they left behind, the galaxy's younger civilizations, humans, Duros, and dozens of others, began to rise. The Republic was coming. The Galactic Republic was not born in a dramatic moment. There was no single treaty, no founding battle, no great cataclysm that called it into being. It grew. Over thousands of years, the peoples of the galaxy slowly, tentatively reached out to each other. Hyperspace scouts, brave or foolhardy beings who jumped into the unknown without knowing what was on the other side, mapped new lanes. Trade routes formed, diplomatic contact was made, alliances were forged. The Republic, in its earliest form, was simply an agreement between a handful of core worlds to not attack each other, to trade, to communicate, to occasionally help each other when something large and dangerous appeared on the horizon. The Jedi were there for all of it. In fact, the Jedi Order was older than the Republic. When the early proto-Republic governments reached out to the Force users who had helped stabilize the galaxy after the collapse of the Infinite Empire, the Jedi agreed to serve as a kind of neutral peacekeeping force. Not rulers, not conquerors, guardians. This relationship, the Jedi as the Republic's sword and shield, would define the next 25,000 years of history. But nothing lasts forever without cracks forming. The first major fracture came roughly 24,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, in what historians would call the First Great Schism. Here is how it happened. Among the Jedi, there had always been debate about the nature of the Force and how to use it. Most Jedi of this era believed the Force should be used for knowledge, defense, and the protection of life. But a faction emerged, charismatic, passionate, increasingly powerful, who believed that the Force was not just a tool for service. It was their birthright, their inheritance, their destiny to rule. These Jedi began to call themselves the Dark Jedi. Not because they were evil, necessarily, at least not at first, because they embraced the dark side, the passion, the will to power, the certainty that Force sensitivity placed them above ordinary beings who couldn't feel the Force at all. The first great schism was a civil war within the Jedi Order, dark Jedi against orthodox Jedi. The conflict was brutal, Force users of tremendous power tearing each other apart on a dozen worlds. The orthodox Jedi won, but what to do with the survivors? You can't simply imprison someone who can use the Force. You can't easily execute people who were your colleagues, your friends, your students, and the Dark Jedi were not going to simply accept defeat and renounce their philosophy. The solution was exile. The surviving Dark Jedi were loaded onto ships, pointed toward the unknown regions of the galaxy, the unmapped, largely unexplored edges of the star map, and told never to return. It must have felt like death. Cast out from everything they knew, their lightsabers taken, their place in galactic civilization stripped away, sent into void and darkness. And I want you to sit with that for a moment. Put yourself in the position of one of those dark Jedi. You were not born evil. You grew up in the Jedi Order, trained from childhood or young adulthood in the traditions of the Force, in discipline and service and the deep, complex beauty of the light side. You learned to meditate. You learned to heal. You sat through thousands of hours of lessons about the nature of the Force, about balance and wisdom and the responsibility that comes with power. And then you changed. Or you were always different and only recently let it show. You started to believe, and this is the crucial part. You started to genuinely believe that your use of the Force, your power, your sensitivity to the invisible energy that flows through all living things, made you something more than ordinary. Not in an arrogant, cartoon villain way, in the way that any person who has worked harder than everyone else, who is more talented than everyone else, who can do things that other people simply cannot, begins to feel that the rules written for average people perhaps should not apply to them. The Dark Jedi didn't think of themselves as villains. They thought of themselves as visionaries who had been silenced by the mediocre and the afraid. Being exiled probably hardened that belief considerably, but it wasn't death, not even close. Because on the other side of that darkness, the Dark Jedi found something extraordinary. They found the Sith. The Sith were not originally Force users. They were a species, red-skinned, fearsome, with a natural affinity for the dark side of the Force that was baked into their very biology. The Sith species had built a civilization on a handful of worlds in the unknown regions, centered on Korriban, a bleak, tomb-riddled planet that radiated dark side energy so powerfully you could feel it like a physical pressure against your chest. Korriban is worth dwelling on for a moment, because it becomes one of the most important locations in all of Star Wars lore, and it's worth understanding what makes it so significant. Korriban is a world of rust-red deserts, enormous valleys carved by ancient geological violence, and cliffs honeycombed with tombs. The Sith buried their dead in these tombs, great kings and warlords and mystics, and the concentration of dark side energy from so many Sith deaths over so many thousands of years made the planet itself into a kind of resonance chamber for dark side energy. Visiting Korriban wasn't just visiting a graveyard. It was visiting a place where the boundary between the living and the dead was thin and strange, where the echoes of ancient Sith lords could still be felt, still be heard in quiet moments, still be interacted with if you had the skill and the courage. The Valley of the Dark Lords, the main burial canyon, was lined with enormous carved facades, each marking the tomb of someone who had ruled the Sith Empire. Standing at the entrance to the valley, looking down that long corridor of ancient stone faces gazing down at you, each representing someone who had held absolute power over a civilization that itself consumed worlds. It was one of the most psychologically overwhelming experiences in the galaxy. The Sith species had their own primitive understanding of the Force, which they called Sith magic, rituals, alchemical practices, the ability to create monstrous creatures through Force manipulation. They were not Jedi. They had not been touched by the galactic civilization developing in the inner galaxy. They were something older and stranger. When the exiled Dark Jedi arrived on Korriban, the Sith looked upon them with awe. Here were beings of tremendous power, beings who could use the dark side in ways the Sith had never imagined, beings who had lightsabers, weapons of pure energy, and the skill to use them. The Sith didn't fight them, they worshipped them. The Dark Jedi, rather than finding a fight they were too weakened to win, found subjects, followers, a species that would do whatever they commanded. Over the centuries that followed, the Dark Jedi interbred with the Sith species. They absorbed Sith culture, magic, and philosophy. They became lords, Sith lords, rulers of an entire civilization. And they built something magnificent and terrible. The first Sith Empire, ruled by a being called the Dark Lord of the Sith, a title of absolute authority. The Sith Empire quietly built itself up in the unknown regions over thousands of years. They expanded, they conquered neighboring worlds, they developed their own technology, their own fleet, their own traditions, and they remembered the Jedi who had cast them out. They did not forget. Sith never forget. 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, we're now in territory that many Star Wars fans will recognize. This is the era of the Tales of the Jedi comics, the deep lore that the creators of the Old Republic era drew from most heavily. And this era begins with a catastrophic mistake. A pair of hyperspace explorers, brothers named Gav and Jory Darrigan, were deep in debt, desperate, and running from trouble. They made a blind hyperspace jump, the equivalent of closing your eyes, pointing at a map, and jumping to wherever your finger lands, and ended up dropping out of hyperspace directly into the middle of the Sith Empire's home space. Specifically, they arrived at Korriban, the tomb world, the dark heart of everything. The Sith didn't know what to make of them at first. These two humans appeared from nowhere, out of the unmapped regions that lay between the Empire and the Republic. Were they spies, scouts, an advanced force? The Dark Lord at the time was Marka Ragnos, ancient, immensely powerful, perhaps the greatest Sith Lord who had ever lived up to that point. He was dying when the Darrigans arrived, and his death triggered a succession crisis within the Empire. Two powerful Sith Lords competed for the title of Dark Lord. Naga Sadow, who was aggressive, ambitious, and hungry for expansion, and Ludo Kresh, who was cautious, isolationist, and suspicious of anything from outside Sith space. Naga Sadow saw the Darrigans for what they were, an opportunity. He freed them. He gave them information, resources, a means of escape, and he used the fact of their arrival and their subsequent escape to convince the Empire that the Republic had found them. That invasion was coming, that they had to strike first. It was brilliant, manipulative, and utterly ruthless. Naga Sadow became Dark Lord of the Sith, and then he launched the Great Hyperspace War. The Sith fleet came pouring out of the unknown regions like a nightmare made real. Ships unlike anything the Republic had ever seen. Warriors powered by the dark side of the Force. Sith Lords who could rip reality apart with their anger. They struck at Coruscant, the Republic capital, and a dozen other worlds simultaneously. For a moment, it looked like the Republic might actually fall. But a few things went wrong for Naga Sadow. First, the Republic's Jedi were more powerful than he had anticipated. Master Odan-Ur, an ancient, brilliant Jedi who had actually foreseen the Hyperspace War in a vision years earlier and tried to warn the Republic, coordinated the Jedi response. The Sith had power, but the Jedi had organization, knowledge of the terrain, and the motivation of defending their homes. Second, Naga Sadow's own illusion projections, a technique he had mastered that could create false images of Sith forces to confuse the enemy, backfired spectacularly when Republic forces stumbled onto the truth of how they worked. The phantom armies dissolved. Third, and most critically, Ludo Kresh, the Sith Lord who had lost the succession contest, attacked Naga Sadow's base of operations while the main fleet was away. Believing Sadow had overextended himself, the Sith Empire tore itself apart from the inside while trying to conquer the Republic. The Republic and the Jedi launched a devastating counterattack. The Sith fleet was shattered. The Republic forces chased the survivors all the way back to Korriban and bombarded it from orbit. Naga Sadow fled into deep space with a handful of ships. The first Sith Empire was over, or so everyone thought. The centuries that followed the Hyperspace War were, broadly speaking, one of the great peaceful eras of galactic history. The Republic expanded, trade flourished. Worlds that had been too remote or too primitive to join the galactic community were slowly integrated. The Jedi Order entered what many called a golden age. The great Jedi library world of Ossus was a center of learning unmatched in the galaxy. Tens of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. Jedi artifacts from cultures so ancient no one living remembered them. The collected wisdom of every Force tradition the Jedi had ever encountered. Great Jedi masters of this era included Odan-Ur, who lived for nearly 900 years, an age that made even Yoda seem young, and Arkajeth and Thon, whose species and appearance were so strange that new students sometimes failed to recognize him as a Jedi Master at all, and Nomi's Sunrider, who would become one of the most celebrated Jedi of the age. But the quiet never lasts, because Naga Sadow had not simply died out there in deep space. He had found a new world. He had preserved something of the Sith legacy. And though he himself eventually fell into a coma, sustained by Sith sorcery, the seeds he had planted would eventually grow into something monstrous. His name was Freedon Nad, and through Freedon Nad, the ancient darkness began to seep back into the galaxy. Freedon Nad had been a Jedi. Once. He was talented, brilliantly so, but consumed by ambition in a way the Jedi Order found troubling. When he was denied the rank of Jedi Master, he turned away from the Order entirely, sought out the spirit of Naga Sadow in the deep reaches of space, learned the ancient Sith arts, and then carved his way across the galaxy until he found a world called Onderon. Onderon is a jungle world, wild and dangerous, perpetually at war with the creatures that inhabit it. The original settlers of Onderon had, over generations, evolved a bizarre culture in response to the planet's dangers. They sealed themselves inside walled cities and declared everything outside the walls to be the domain of the Beast Riders, outcasts, criminals, the rejected. The Beast Riders, in turn, had learned to tame and ride the enormous Drexel creatures, flying monsters that most people would find nightmarish, and had built their own warrior culture in the jungles. Nad arrived on Onderon, conquered it, and ruled it as a Sith king for centuries after his death, because death, for a sufficiently powerful Sith Lord, was not necessarily the end. His spirit lingered. His tomb became a place of dark side power. His teachings corrupted the royal line of Onderon across generations. By the time the Jedi dispatched a task force to investigate the situation on Onderon, Jedi Masters Arka-Jeth and his students, including the young Ulic Qel-Droma and his brother Kay, they were walking into a civil war between the Walled City and the Beast Riders, both factions corrupted in different ways by Nad's influence. What followed was a multi-year series of conflicts. The Beast Wars of Onderon, the Nadist Revolt, the discovery and suppression of Nad's surviving dark side followers. But destroying a Sith presence is never as simple as burning the temple. The knowledge always leaks out. Someone always survives. Two nobles of Onderon, Satal and Alima Cato, heirs to a vast fortune and bored beyond imagining with their privileged lives, had been studying Sith artifacts as a kind of dark hobby. When the Nadists were defeated and the surviving followers scattered, Satal and Alima managed to recover a Sith tome, a book of dark side teachings sealed in an ancient language they couldn't read. They were self-indulgent and dangerous, but not completely stupid. They went to Coruscant, the Republic capital, the center of galactic civilization, and stole the knowledge they needed to translate the book from the Jedi library itself. Can you imagine the audacity? Walking into the most protected repository of Force knowledge in the Republic and simply stealing what you came for? They didn't just steal books. On their way out, they encountered a group of Jedi students, and Satal used his partially translated Sith magic to infect one of them with dark side poison. That student was Ulic Qel-Droma, the same Jedi who had fought on Onderon. The poison didn't kill him, but it opened a door. Satal and Alima returned to their home territory, the Empress Teta system, a cluster of 7 worlds in the core, and used their stolen Sith knowledge to stage a coup. They overthrew the existing government, declared themselves rulers, and began building a movement of dark side followers they called the Krath. The Krath were, in the grand sweep of Sith history, relatively minor, but their impact was disproportionate because of who they ensnared. When the Republic and the Jedi attempted to retake the Empress Teta system by force, it was a catastrophe. The Krath, using Sith war droids and dark side battle techniques drawn from Nad's teachings, slaughtered the assault force. Jedi Master Arka-Jeth himself was nearly killed. Ulic Qel-Droma watched friends die around him. And in the aftermath, Ulic made a decision that changed everything. He would infiltrate the Krath, go undercover, learn their secrets from the inside, and then destroy them. The Jedi Council begged him not to. They warned him that no one could play with the dark side and remain unaffected, that he was placing himself in unimaginable danger, not physical danger, but spiritual danger, the danger of losing himself. Ulic went anyway, and the Jedi were right. Ulic was captured, tortured, and then something happened that no one had expected. Alima Cato became fascinated by him. Instead of killing him, she made him her consort, and in the intimacy of that dark court, surrounded by Sith philosophy and dark side energy every day, Ulic began to slip. He told himself he was still in control, still playing a role, still the good Jedi, biding his time. He wasn't. Into this situation walked Exar Kun. If Ulic Qel-Droma is a tragedy, a good man consumed by darkness through circumstances and grief, then Exar Kun is something darker. Exar Kun chose. Exar Kun was a Jedi of extraordinary talent and almost bottomless pride. His master was the ancient, brilliant Vodo Siosk Bas, a Kravaki Jedi who had trained more great Jedi than almost anyone in history. Kun was his greatest student, he was also his greatest failure. Kun grew obsessed with the ancient Sith. He read everything he could find. He studied their holocrons, their techniques, their history. His master warned him. The council warned him. He ignored them all. He went to Onderon. He descended into the tomb of Freedon Nad, and there the spirit of Nad appeared to him. Nad's ghost mocked him, told him that his Jedi training had left him weak, incomplete, a shadow of what he could be. He had the potential to be the greatest Sith Lord since Naga Sadow, and instead he was playing at being a monk. Kun rejected this, fought back, tried to destroy the spirit, and nearly died for it. Broken, his body crushed by falling rubble in the catacombs, Exar Kun faced a choice. Accept death, or accept the Sith. He chose the Sith. Nad's spirit laughed, healed him, and showed him the way to Korriban, the tomb world of the ancient Sith Lords. And on Korriban, surrounded by the echoes of 10,000 years of Sith power, Exar Kun became something the galaxy hadn't seen in over 1,000 years. He became a true Dark Lord of the Sith. Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma found each other, as the dark side tends to arrange such meetings. Their first encounter was almost a duel. They fought with lightsabers on Coruscant before the entire Senate and the assembled Jedi Council. It should have ended with one of them dead. Instead, the spirit of Marka Ragnos, the ancient Sith Lord, dead for 5,000 years but still lingering as a ghost, appeared. He declared them both worthy. Exar Kun would be Dark Lord. Ulic Qel-Droma would be his apprentice. Together, they would rebuild the Sith Empire. The Great Sith War, also called the Exar Kun War, is one of the most devastating conflicts in galactic history. The scale is almost impossible to comprehend. Exar Kun used a technique drawn from an ancient Sith holocron to corrupt a number of Jedi Knights, turning them to the dark side simultaneously, overnight, like a virus spreading through the Order. Suddenly, the Republic and the Jedi were fighting their own, and they couldn't always be sure who to trust. Ulic Qel-Droma led the Krath, and eventually the Mandalorians, the warrior culture we know from the movies, into war against the Republic. The Mandalorians, at this point in history, were at the height of their original power, a confederation of deadly warriors who fought for Ulic, not because they believed in the Sith, but because Ulic had defeated their leader, Mandalore the Indomitable, in single combat. By Mandalorian custom, that made Ulic their master. Alima Cato, still drunk on her own power and increasingly reckless, tried to use a Sith technique she didn't fully understand to destroy a Republic fleet at a place called the Kron Cluster, a system of unstable stars. She succeeded, partially. The fleet was destroyed, but the chain reaction she triggered in those unstable stars was beyond anything she could control. The Kron Cluster exploded, 9 stars going supernova simultaneously, releasing a wave of stellar destruction that traveled across space at the speed of light, toward Ossus, the great Jedi library world, the center of millennia of accumulated knowledge, the heart of the Jedi Order's civilization. The Jedi had hours to evacuate, hours to grab whatever they could from tens of thousands of years of archives and records. Most of it was left behind. Most of it was lost forever. The Kron supernova, the destruction of the Kron Cluster and the burning of Ossus, is one of the most heartbreaking moments in Old Republic history. Imagine a library containing everything humanity had ever learned. Every book, every archive, every record going back to before civilization as we know it. And then imagine it burning. That is what the destruction of Ossus meant. Nomi's Sunrider, who had grown over the years of this conflict from a grieving widow who barely knew how to hold a lightsaber into one of the most powerful Jedi alive, led the evacuation of Ossus. But she couldn't save everything. No one could. And then she did something no Jedi had done before, and few have done since. She used the Force to sever Ulic Qel-Droma from the Force entirely. This is a technique called projected Force suppression, or more colloquially, the Force severing. The ability to reach into someone's connection to the Force and cut it, not weaken it, not dampen it, cut it, make them unable to feel the Force at all. Ulic had killed his own brother during the war, had cut down Qel-Droma, his own flesh and blood, in battle. And in the aftermath of that murder, standing over his brother's body, Ulic had the first clear-eyed moment he'd had in years. He saw what he'd become, and Nomi severed his connection to the Force. Overnight, Ulic went from Sith Lord, wielder of tremendous dark power, to ordinary man. Without his connection to the Force, his will to continue evaporated. He gave himself up. He testified against Exar Kun, revealing the location of Kun's base of operations, the jungle moon of Yavin 4. Yes, that Yavin 4. The same moon where the Rebel Alliance would one day destroy the Death Star. Thousands of years before Luke Skywalker was born, Exar Kun built his dark temple there. The dark side energy he left behind would linger in that jungle for 4,000 years. The Republic fleet bombarded Yavin 4. Exar Kun, realizing he was about to die, did what only the most powerful Sith could manage. He performed a ritual to tear his own spirit free of his body, sacrificing the physical to preserve the spiritual. He absorbed the life energies of his Massassi warriors, his servants, his followers, the beings who had trusted and worshipped him, and bound his spirit to the stones of his temple. He would not die. He would simply wait and wait and wait for 4,000 years. Decades passed after the Great Sith War. The Republic recovered, slowly, painfully. The Jedi rebuilt, also slowly, also painfully. Ossus was gone. Thousands of artifacts and records were lost forever. The Order was smaller now, its ranks depleted. But the galaxy had known peace before, and managed to rebuild it. There was reason for cautious hope. That hope was interrupted by the Mandalorians. The Mandalorians had fought for Ulic Qel-Droma during the Sith War, but after Ulic's capture and the war's end, they drifted without purpose. Their leader, Mandalore the Indomitable, had died during the war. The new Mandalore, Mandalore the Ultimate, had a vision. He wanted to test his warriors against the greatest challenges the galaxy could offer. And the Republic, weakened, stretched thin, slowly recovering from the devastation of the Sith War, looked very much like an opportunity. But here's the secret history that changes everything about the Mandalorian Wars. Mandalore the Ultimate didn't just decide to attack the Republic out of pure warrior's pride. He was manipulated. A figure calling himself Darth Revan. We'll get to Revan properly very soon, I promise. Had spent time in the unknown regions before the war and had made contact with Mandalore the Ultimate. Revan whispered in the Mandalore's ear, encouraged his expansionist ambitions, helped him believe that the time was right, that the Republic was vulnerable, that this was the moment Mandalorian glory demanded action. Why? Because Revan needed the Mandalorian Wars to happen. He needed the galaxy to be in chaos. He needed the Jedi to be exhausted and depleted. He needed an excuse to build the military infrastructure and experienced base he would need for his real plan. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The Mandalorian Wars began with the Neo-Crusaders, Mandalorian warriors who swept through the Outer Rim with terrifying efficiency. World after world fell. The Republic's military struggled to mount an effective defense against an enemy that was faster, more aggressive, and seemingly indifferent to casualties. The Jedi Council refused to intervene. This is important because it's a decision that will have consequences echoing across the next decade of galactic history. The Council debated the situation. They meditated on it. They concluded that the Force was not directing them to enter this war, that something about the conflict felt wrong, felt like a trap, and they declined to commit the Jedi Order to battle. Their caution was reasonable. In hindsight, they were right that it was a trap. But the consequences of their caution were catastrophic, because while the Council deliberated, 2 Jedi did not wait: Revan and his best friend, Alec, who would later take the name Malak. Revan was perhaps the most brilliantly gifted Jedi of his generation. Charismatic, tactically brilliant, unconventional in his thinking, and possessed of a kind of magnetic quality that made people want to follow him. Alec was his closest friend, deeply devoted, perhaps the one person who matched Revan in raw force power, if not in strategic genius. They defied the Council. They called for volunteers, and thousands of Jedi, particularly the younger ones, the ones who couldn't stand watching the Outer Rim worlds burn while their order debated, answered. The Revanchists, they called themselves, named for Revan. The Jedi who stayed behind called them reckless, called them arrogant, said they were the worst of what Jedi should be, warriors seeking glory. But the Revanchists saved the Republic. Over years of brutal fighting, Revan turned the tide of the Mandalorian Wars. He was a tactical genius of the First Order, willing to make hard decisions, to sacrifice territory to gain advantage, to think 10 moves ahead. He was beloved by his troops in a way that went beyond normal military loyalty. They would have followed him anywhere. And eventually, he followed the Mandalorians to their last stand, the Battle of Malachor V. Malachor V was a shattered, barely habitable world, perpetually racked by enormous storms, its surface broken and scarred. The Mandalorians, knowing defeat was close, retreated there for a final engagement, and Revan won. But the cost was immense. An experimental superweapon, the mass shadow generator, was activated over Malachor V, creating a gravitational anomaly that crushed most of the fleet. Republic and Mandalorian ships alike. Many of Revan's own soldiers died. Malachor V itself was torn apart, its surface shattered, its crust cracked and broken. Malachor V would become a place of such concentrated dark side energy from all that death and suffering that it would remain a wound in the Force for thousands of years. But the Mandalorian Wars were over. Mandalore the Ultimate was dead. The Mandalorian fleet was destroyed. The survivors scattered across the galaxy, their culture broken, their purpose lost. Revan stood victorious, and then he disappeared into the unknown regions. He took Malak with him. He took a handful of loyal followers, and he said he was hunting the source of the Mandalorian threat, the power that had driven them to attack the Republic. He was gone for a year. When he came back, he was not the same man. What happened in the unknown regions? Revan had gone looking for the source of the Mandalorian threat, and he found it. He found the remnants of the true Sith Empire, not the one that Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma had been trying to rebuild, but something far older and more formidable. The original Sith Empire, the one that had never been destroyed, that had retreated into the unknown regions after the Hyperspace War and spent 3,000 years quietly rebuilding. Their emperor was a being named Vitiate, and Vitiate was arguably the most powerful and most terrifying Sith who ever lived. We'll spend more time with Vitiate later, because he casts a shadow over everything for the next 3,000 years. But for now, what matters is this. Vitiate corrupted Revan. Revan's exposure to the true Sith, to Vitiate's influence, to the accumulated darkness of the unknown regions, it turned him. Some accounts say Revan was broken and remade by Vitiate deliberately. Others say Revan found the ancient Sith teachings and convinced himself that the only way to protect the Republic was to become powerful enough to destroy what was coming, and that he would wield the dark side as a weapon and then discard it when the job was done. Either way, Revan returned to known space, calling himself Darth Revan, Dark Lord of the Sith, and Alec had become Darth Malak, his apprentice. They brought the surviving Mandalorian warriors, the ones who had scattered after Malachor 5, under their banner. They turned many of the Jedi who had followed them into the Mandalorian Wars, and they launched an invasion of the Republic. The Jedi Civil War, also called the Jedi Civil War, was a catastrophe. Revan was a better general than anyone the Republic could produce. He had built the tactics and strategies that defeated the Mandalorians, and now he turned those same skills against his former allies. Planet after planet fell. The Republic military, barely recovered from the Mandalorian Wars, was overwhelmed. And because Revan's forces were led by Jedi turned Sith, the Republic's Jedi defenders were at a tremendous disadvantage, fighting someone trained by the same order, using the same techniques, except now amplified by the dark side and stripped of any hesitation. The Jedi Council, desperate to turn the tide, hatched a plan. They lured Revan into a trap, using a young Jedi Knight named Bastila Shan as bait. Bastila had a rare and remarkable Force ability called Battle Meditation, the power to reach out through the Force and simultaneously inspire friendly forces while demoralizing enemies. In battle, she was worth an entire fleet, but that wasn't why they chose her. They chose her because Bastila was young enough and skilled enough and had a unique ability. She could create force bonds, connections between herself and others. The Council believed that if she got close enough to Revan, she might be able to save him, to pull him back toward the light. The trap worked, partially. Darth Malak, Revan's own apprentice, betrayed his master. He ordered his ships to open fire on Revan's flagship while Bastila and her team were aboard. He tried to kill Revan, Bastila, and anyone else who might challenge his claim to the title of Dark Lord. Revan was nearly killed. His mind was shattered, and Bastila, watching her enemy dying, made a choice. She used the Force to save his life, stabilizing him at the cost of creating exactly the kind of Force bond the Council had hoped for. She brought him back to the Jedi, unconscious and shattered. The Council made a decision that was either wise or deeply unethical, depending on how you look at it. They rebuilt Revan's mind. They wiped his memory, constructed a new identity for him, placed him among other Jedi as an ordinary soldier with no knowledge of who he had been. The most powerful Sith Lord in a generation, walking around with no idea he had ever been a Sith at all. And then they pointed him at Malak, because they needed Revan's knowledge, his memory of the Starforge, the ancient Rakatan's superweapon that Malak was now using to produce a never-ending fleet of warships to defeat the new Dark Lord. So Revan, amnesiac, confused, slowly falling in love with Bastila Shan, traveled the galaxy looking for star maps, fragments of the route to the Starforge, without knowing why he was doing it or that he had done it all before. It is, depending on your perspective, one of the most brilliant or most horrifying things the Jedi Council ever did. And eventually, inevitably, Revan remembered. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. The memories came flooding back, Not all of them, but enough. Who he had been, what he had done. He stood in a place of darkness and remembered standing in the same kind of darkness before, on the other side of it, holding a lightsaber towards someone else who was now holding one toward him. He remembered giving orders that resulted in the deaths of thousands. He remembered the faces of people who had trusted Darth Revan, genuinely trusted him, believed in him, followed him willingly, and what he had done with that trust. He remembered Malak, not as an enemy, as a friend, the best friend he had ever had, the person who had stood beside him on Malachor Fifiv and watched the mass shadow generator fire, and understood better than anyone alive what that choice had cost both of them. He remembered choosing the dark side, and he remembered, in some half-formed, fractured way, why. Not because he wanted power for its own sake, because he was afraid of what was coming, afraid that the Republic, the Jedi, the whole beautiful, fragile civilization they had spent their lives protecting, was not strong enough to survive what he had found in the unknown regions. That fear didn't justify what he had done. He understood that too. But here's the miracle of it. The man who had rebuilt himself from the ruins of Darth Revan's identity was, in many ways, a better man than either the Jedi Revan or the Sith Revan had been. He had made choices without the weight of either the light side's rigid doctrine or the dark side's corrupting influence. He had grown. He chose the light. He and Bastila, who had herself briefly fallen to the dark side under Malak's influence and had been pulled back by Revan, went to the Star Forge, and there, in the heart of the ancient Rakatan weapon, Revan faced Darth Malak, the man who had once been his closest friend, the man who had betrayed him. The duel was legendary. Both of them were immensely powerful, Malak drawing on the Star Forge itself, channeling dark side energy from the enormous weapon, while Revan fought with the clarity and focus of someone who had chosen the light, with full awareness of what the alternative felt like. Revan won. Malak died. The Star Forge was destroyed, and the Jedi Civil War ended. The Republic celebrated. The Jedi celebrated. Revan was hailed as a hero, the man who had saved the Republic twice, once from the Mandalorians, once from himself. But Revan couldn't rest. He remembered enough of what he had found in the unknown regions to know that the true Sith Empire was still out there. Vitiate was still out there. He left again, into the unknown regions, alone this time. Bastila watched him go. He was captured by Vitiate, held prisoner for centuries, and the threat he had gone to stop remained, growing in the shadows. The Jedi Civil War was over, but its aftermath was almost as bad as the war itself. The Sith triumvirate. While Revan and Malak had been the obvious face of Sith power, 3 of Revan's former generals had survived the war and had no intention of going quietly. They were Darth Nihilus, Darth Sion, and the one who orchestrated everything, Darth Trier. Darth Trier, real name Kreia, was formerly a Jedi Master, a teacher of exceptional skill and extremely unconventional philosophy. She had been Revan's original master long before the Mandalorian Wars, and had been exiled from the Jedi Order for her unorthodox views. Her view of the Force was unusual. She didn't see it as a power to be used. She saw it as a kind of oppressive force of fate, something that manipulated living beings like pieces on a board, steering events to serve its own purposes, stripping intelligent beings of genuine free will. She hated the Force the way you might hate an abusive parent. She understood it intimately. She was skilled in its use, and she despised it. She wanted, in the deepest possible sense, to wound the Force itself, to kill it, to free all living beings from its influence. This made her one of the most complicated and philosophically interesting villains in Star Wars history. She had trained at the Sith Academy on Malachor V and assembled the triumvirate, herself, Nihilus, and Sion, to hunt down and destroy the last of the Jedi. Because in the aftermath of the Jedi Civil War, there were very few Jedi left. Most had died in the war. Many who survived the war went into hiding, scattered across the galaxy, trying to stay under the radar of whatever dark side force came next. The Jedi Order, never enormous to begin with, had been reduced to a remnant. Darth Nihilus was tasked with hunting them. Nihilus was not really a person anymore. He had been at Malachor V when the mass shadow generator fired, a survivor of that catastrophic force wound. The wound had eaten him from the inside out, consuming his physical being and replacing it with hunger. He was a wound in the Force, given a mask and a set of robes. He fed on Force-sensitive beings, draining their connection to the Force and consuming it. Entire planets of Force users could be wiped out by him in moments. He was one of the most purely terrifying beings in Star Wars lore. Darth Sion was broken differently. He had been shattered, physically destroyed multiple times, and had learned to hold himself together through pure will and pain. Every wound he had ever taken was still there, kept from killing him by his absolute refusal to die and his channeling of constant agony through the dark side. He was a creature of suffering, held together by hatred. Against these three came one Jedi, Meetra Surik, the Jedi exile. And before we get into what she did, let's talk about who she was, because she tends to get overshadowed by Revan in the popular imagination, partly because Revan is one of the most compelling characters in Star Wars history, and partly because Revan got a sequel novel, while Meetra only got the one game. But Meetra Surik is, in many ways, just as fascinating. She had been a general, not just a fighter, not just a Force user, a military commander responsible for thousands of lives in the brutal arithmetic of the Mandalorian Wars. She had made the call to use the mass shadow generator at Malachor V, knowing what it would do, knowing that many of her own troops would die. She had made that call because she judged it necessary to end the war, and then she had lived, or tried to live, with the consequences. The Jedi Council's decision to exile her was presented as a judgment. In reality, it was partially panic. Here was a Jedi who had cut herself off from the Force, not deliberately, but through the unconscious self-protective act of a mind that could not process what it had witnessed. And the Council didn't know how to handle that. She was simultaneously proof that the Jedi could be wounded beyond the Order's ability to heal, and a walking reminder of the Mandalorian Wars that the Council still felt guilty about staying out of. So they sent her away, and she went, because what else do you do when the institution you've given your life to tells you that you no longer belong to it? She spent years on the Outer Rim, taking odd jobs, surviving, trying to find some way to live in a universe where she could feel the Force around her, but couldn't quite reach it, like trying to hear a conversation through thick glass. Present, tantalizing, just out of reach. And then the call came, and she answered it. Not because she had forgiven the Council, not because she believed everything would work out fine, but because the alternative was standing aside while the last of the Jedi were hunted down, and she found she couldn't do that. Surik had fought in the Mandalorian Wars, had been at Malachor V when the mass shadow generator fired. The devastation of that moment, the deaths of thousands of people she had known and fought beside, had been so overwhelming that she had unconsciously cut herself off from the Force, like a circuit breaker tripping to prevent overload. The Jedi Council, interpreting this as the act of someone who had caused such harm that the Force itself rejected her, had exiled her, cast her out of the Order. She had spent years wandering the Outer Rim, cut off from the Force, just trying to survive. And then the Sith Triumvirate began hunting the last Jedi, and the Council called her back. What followed was Surik's journey across the galaxy, to Telos, to Onderon, to Naga Sadow, to ancient dead worlds, gathering the last surviving Jedi Masters and trying to piece together what was happening. Along the way, she was guided by Kreia, who attached herself to Surik as a mysterious, morally ambiguous companion whose actual allegiances were never entirely clear until the very end. The other Jedi Masters, once Surik found them, were largely useless. Traumatized by the war, shattered by their losses, some of them had retreated into philosophies that were essentially paralysis dressed up as wisdom. When the Masters finally convened at a place called Dantooine, the old Jedi enclave, rebuilt after the Civil War, their solution to the crisis was to cut Surik off from the Force again, severing her connection permanently. They believed she was a wound in the Force, a tear in the fabric of reality caused by the severing of so many connections at Malachor 5, and they thought that removing her from the equation would close the wound. Kreia found this unjust, and Kreia had a way of expressing her displeasure that was difficult to argue with. She killed all 4 Jedi Masters simultaneously, using the Force bond she shared with Surik to drain their strength and leave them dead. Eventually, Surik confronted Kreia at Malachor 5, the one place she had tried to forget, the wound in the galaxy that mirrored the wound within herself. The truth of Kreia's identity was revealed. Her plan to use Surik to destroy the Sith Triumvirate, to eliminate the last vestiges of Sith power, and then to use Malachor 5 as a crucible to wound the Force so deeply that the Force could never again manipulate living beings, was laid bare. Surik defeated Nihilus. Sion, faced with Surik and forced to confront the meaninglessness of his continued existence, chose at last to let himself die. And Surik defeated Kreia. The old woman, dying, gave Surik one final gift, a vision of the futures of everyone she had known. And then Mitra Surik left for the unknown regions, to find Revan. She would find him. She would help him escape. But she would not survive the encounter with Vitiat's servant, Lord Scourge. And Revan, free at last, would spend centuries more in Vitiat's shadow before the next great chapter of history began. 300 years. For 300 years, after the defeat of the Sith Triumvirate, the galaxy had relative peace. The Republic rebuilt. The Jedi Order slowly regained strength. Trade flourished. Worlds were settled. It couldn't last. It never does. In 3681 BBY, 3681 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Sith Empire struck. Not Revan's Sith, not Exar Kun's Sith, not any of the various dark Jedi cults and splinter groups that had caused havoc over the centuries. The true Sith Empire, the original, the one that had been building in the unknown regions for 3,000 years, under the rule of Emperor Vitiate. 3,000 years. Vitiate had been Emperor of the true Sith Empire for 3,000 years. He had achieved something that no other being in galactic history had managed. Effective immortality, sustained through the dark side and through repeated acts of consuming the life energies of those around him. We'll talk more about who Vitiate was, his real identity, his astonishing history. But for now, understand the scale. An empire built over 30 centuries, by a being who had been alive longer than most civilizations. with a military machine of a size the Republic had never imagined existed, and it descended on the Republic all at once. The Sith Empire attacked on multiple fronts simultaneously. Their fleet was enormous and experienced, 3,000 years of military tradition. Their commanders were brilliant, their warriors were fanatical, and they hit worlds throughout the core and mid-rim at the same time, preventing the Republic from concentrating force against any single attack. One of the most iconic moments of the initial invasion was the sacking of Coruscant. The Sith didn't just raid Coruscant, they sacked it. Darth Malgus, a Sith Lord of extraordinary power and tactical brilliance, led the assault personally. He and his forces tore through the Jedi Temple on Coruscant in an attack that became one of the defining moments of the era. Masters died, Jedi died. The temple, a symbol of everything the Order stood for, was burned and shattered. The Republic, devastated, agreed to negotiate. The resulting treaty, the Treaty of Coruscant, ended the open warfare, but essentially gave the Sith Empire everything it had conquered and acknowledged it as a co-equal power to the Republic. It was a humiliation. Many in the Republic and the Jedi Order never forgave the politicians who signed it, but it was also a breathing space, a chance to recover, to rearm, to plan. The era that followed the Treaty of Coruscant was a Cold War, both sides nominally at peace, actually continuously maneuvering against each other. Proxy conflicts on a dozen worlds, intelligence operations, political manipulation, economic warfare. This is the setting of the game Star Wars, the Old Republic, if you've ever played it, a galaxy teetering between Cold War and open conflict, with heroes and villains on both sides and nothing quite as simple as it looks. Let me tell you about Tenebrae. That was his name. Before he was the Sith Emperor, before he was vitiate, when he was just a child on a forgotten Sith colony world called Medrias. Tenebrae was born around 8,000 years before the Treaty of Coruscant. His mother was a poor farmer's wife. His father was Lord Dramath, one of the Sith Lords who ruled the colony world, who had taken her against her will. By the age of 6, Tenebrae had killed his mother and his stepfather. By 10, he had killed Lord Dramath himself and taken control of the planet. By 13, he had conquered the world, not through military force, but through force manipulation and a systematic campaign of psychological and physical domination that left every living being on Medrias completely under his control. Let me be very clear about what I mean when I say he was a child. He was not a prodigy who stumbled into power. He was not a child soldier shaped by circumstance. He was something genuinely different, something that scholars who studied him thousands of years later could not categorize cleanly. He did not seem to feel the things that ordinary beings feel: empathy, connection, the instinctive recoil from causing suffering that most species develop in infancy as a social bonding mechanism. He felt hunger and power, and the satisfaction of one feeding the other. His mother had seen it early, had been afraid of her own child in a way that she couldn't explain to anyone. Because what words do you use to tell your husband that the baby frightens you? That when it looks at you, there's something behind its eyes that isn't right? That when it cries, it doesn't sound like need. It sounds like demand. She was right to be afraid. The stepfather had tried to be reasonable, as men in impossible situations often do, had tried to apply ordinary logic. The child is strong in the Force, the child is unusual, the child needs guidance and discipline, to a situation that ordinary logic could not compass. Both of them were dead before Tenebrae's 7th birthday. Lord Dramath had been a Sith Lord, Force-sensitive, trained, experienced. When his bastard child came to him, this small, still, cold-eyed boy who looked at him without fear, without anger, without anything at all. Dramath tried to use the Force to neutralize him. Tenebrae drained him, not quickly, not cleanly. The Dark Council, the ruling body of the Sith Empire of the time, then ruled by Marka Ragnos, investigated. They sent someone to assess this child lord on his conquered world. They found something they couldn't categorize or confront. Naga Sadow himself is said to have encountered the young Tenebrae and recognized him as something beyond normal, even by Sith standards. A being whose darkness wasn't heat or passion or even ambition in the normal sense. It was something cold, absolute, a void. He was given the name Vitiate. He was given authority over his world, and he was, in the polite language of political accommodation, left alone to do as he pleased. What he pleased was horrifying. When the Hyperspace War ended and the Republic crushed the Sith Empire, Vitiate acted quickly. While other Sith Lords fled or died, he convened 8,000 Sith Lords on Medrias, renamed Nathema, for a great ritual. He told them the ritual would preserve the Sith Empire, save them from the Republic, give them power beyond imagining. He lied. The ritual consumed them. All 8,000 Sith Lords, their life energies, their Force connections, everything about them, absorbed into Vitiate. He drank them like water, and in doing so, he didn't just extend his own life. He performed something unprecedented. He stripped the Force from the planet Nathema entirely, not just from the people on the surface, from the planet itself. Every Force connection on Nathema, in every animal, every plant, every molecule of air, was severed. The planet became a dead place in the Force. Not dark side, not light side, just nothing. A void, a hole in the galaxy. Visitors to Nathema in later centuries would describe it as the most psychologically disturbing place they had ever been. The complete absence of the Force in a person who was Force sensitive was described as a kind of death, like going deaf and blind and losing the sense of touch simultaneously. An absence so total it felt like violence. Vitiate survived, immortal, immensely powerful, hidden. He spent the next 1,000 years in the unknown regions, building the true Sith Empire in secret, biding his time. He played a very long game, and he was very, very patient. By the time the true Sith Empire emerged to fight the Republic, Vitiate had ruled for 3,000 years. He had survived not through the preservation of his original body, which had long since been discarded, but by periodically possessing new bodies when the old ones wore out. He was not a man anymore, in any meaningful sense. He was a consciousness, an idea made of Force energy and will. He had also, by this point, developed a new ambition. Nathema had been good. Draining an entire planet's Force connection had given him centuries of extended life. But the effect faded. The energy was consumed. He wanted more. What he wanted, in the end, was everything. He wanted to perform a ritual on a galactic scale, to strip the Force from every living being in the galaxy simultaneously, to consume the lives of trillions, and then he would be truly immortal, truly omnipotent, a god. This was the secret purpose behind the Sith Empire and the endless war with the Republic. Not conquest, not revenge for the Hyperspace War, not even ideology. He wanted to eat the galaxy. The Cold War lasted roughly 40 years after the Treaty of Coruscant, before the fragile peace finally shattered. During those 4 decades, both sides maneuvered constantly. The Jedi and the Republic intelligence services, particularly a group called the Strategic Information Service, or SIS, worked to counter Sith intelligence operations across dozens of worlds. The Sith, meanwhile, pushed wherever they could find weakness. The dark side faction within the Sith Empire was never fully unified. The Dark Council, 12 Sith Lords who, theoretically, ruled alongside the Emperor, was a nest of vipers. Every member was plotting against every other member. Every sphere of influence was being undermined, stolen, or sabotaged. Imperial politics were a blood sport, and several Dark Councillors died under suspicious circumstances during the Cold War years alone. On the Republic side, things weren't much cleaner. The Senate was fractious, corruption was endemic, and several worlds were making noise about whether the Republic was worth belonging to. The Sith Empire was, in some ways, more efficiently governed, if you didn't mind living under totalitarian rule. And honestly, some people didn't mind. This is the uncomfortable truth about the Old Republic era, that the stories set in it are good enough to acknowledge. The Sith Empire, for ordinary non-force-sensitive citizens who kept their heads down and their politics quiet, was not necessarily worse than the Republic to live in day to day. There were jobs, there was infrastructure, there was law, brutal law enforced by beings with force powers who could detect deception and crush resistance with their bare hands. But law, nonetheless. Crime in the Sith Empire was low, for the obvious reason that you would have to be spectacularly brave or spectacularly stupid to mug someone in a society where the enforcers can choke you from 10 feet away without touching you. The Republic, by contrast, had democracy and corruption and freedom and mismanagement and the constant grinding inefficiency of a governing body, trying to represent thousands of worlds with conflicting interests. It had the Jedi, brilliant, noble, powerful, doing their best in a galaxy that never made doing your best easy. People in the Sith Empire knew what the rules were. People in the Republic had the freedom to argue about what the rules should be. Both systems produced heroes. Both produced monsters. The stories of individual soldiers, diplomats, Jedi, Sith, and ordinary people caught between these two civilizations are ultimately the heart of what makes the Old Republic era so compelling. The grand sweep of history is important, but it's the individuals within that sweep who make it matter. When the shooting war finally restarted, it came from multiple directions at once. A Sith Lord named Darth Malgus, the same one who had led the sacking of Coruscant, had become increasingly disillusioned with the Sith Empire's leadership. Malgus was, in many ways, unusual for a Sith. He had a Twi'lek companion, Elena Daru, whom he loved deeply, though he eventually killed her because he recognized that his love for her was a vulnerability his enemies could exploit. He believed in the Sith philosophy of strength, but he also believed that the Empire's racial prejudice against non-human species was weakness, that the Empire would be stronger if it drew its soldiers and its force users from all species rather than privileging humans and near-humans. He was, in other words, a Sith who had worked out that diversity makes empires more powerful, and the established Sith hierarchy hated him for it. Eventually, Malgus broke from the Emperor and established what he called the New Empire, a rival Sith faction that accepted beings of all species. He was defeated by heroes from both the Republic and the Sith Empire proper, because some problems are dangerous enough that old enemies cooperate to solve them. Throughout this period, countless individuals, Jedi and Sith, soldiers and smugglers, spies and diplomats, shaped the course of history in ways large and small. The stories of the Old Republic era are, in many ways, the stories of ordinary people and Force users caught in extraordinary circumstances. A Jedi Knight discovering that the galaxy is more morally complicated than the Order's teachings had suggested. a Sith apprentice, questioning whether strength is really the only thing that matters. A Republic soldier who becomes a hero not through force powers or political connections, but through sheer stubborn competence and unwillingness to quit. These are the stories that make the Old Republic era so beloved by fans who dig into it. It's not just the grand sweep of galactic war, it's the human and alien moments within that sweep. Even as the Republic and the Sith Empire fought their wars, Vitiate was pursuing his own agenda. He had identified the planets he would need for his ritual. He had been preparing for centuries, and in secret, using agents he controlled through force bonds, or rather than any formal chain of command, he began moving his pieces into place. The Emperor did not particularly care whether the Sith Empire won its war against the Republic. That was, for him, simply a distraction, a way to keep both sides busy while he worked. He had done this before. On Nathema, he had consumed 8,000 Sith. What he planned now was on a scale 8,000 times larger, but he was not unopposed. The one person who had ever truly understood Vitiate's nature and had been trying to stop him for centuries before anyone else realized the threat existed, was Revan. Revan, who had been held prisoner by Vitiate for 300 years, who had managed to maintain his identity through sheer will while imprisoned in a Maelstrom Nebula prison, who had spent those 3 centuries not in despair but in study, learning everything he could about Vitiate, about his weaknesses, about how he might be stopped. A team of heroes eventually found and freed Revan. But freedom didn't make Revan sane. 300 years as a prisoner of the most powerful dark side entity alive had changed him. The Revan who emerged from the Maelstrom Nebula was not the hero who had saved the Republic twice. He was something broken and rebuilt wrong, convinced that the only way to defeat Vitiate was to kill him, and that the only way to kill him was with an army large enough to overwhelm even a god, which meant letting Vitiate attempt his ritual, letting the Emperor gather his power, and then striking when the ritual was at its most vulnerable. It was the kind of plan that made a certain cold, mathematical sense, and was also completely horrifying if you thought about what the ritual would do to the people caught in it. The heroes who confronted Vitiate at the Emperor's fortress discovered something that complicated everything. Vitiate's ritual had failed, sort of. He had not consumed the galaxy, but he had consumed a world, Ziost, a Sith fortress world, and one of the most significant planets in the Empire. He had drained every living thing on it, every person, every animal, every plant. The planet was left a dead, grey wasteland, and Vitiate, having consumed a world and all its life, was more powerful than ever. He was also, finally, starting to fracture. 3,000 years of existence, 3,000 years of ambition and manipulation, and consuming others to sustain himself. Even the most powerful mind eventually starts to show cracks. Vitiate began to manifest multiple personalities, or perhaps to allow different aspects of himself to operate with some independence. One of these aspects took a new name, Valkorion, the immortal emperor of a civilization called Zakuul. Zakuul. No one in the Republic or the Sith Empire had ever heard of it. It was a world in the far reaches of wild space, unmapped, unknown, untouched by galactic civilization. But Vitiate had found it long ago, had established himself there under the name Valkorion, had, over centuries, built a civilization from scratch, one very different from both the Republic and the Sith Empire. Where the Sith Empire was hierarchical, brutal, and obsessed with power as a philosophy, Zakuul was strange. It had a warrior culture, certainly. Its sky troopers were deadly combat droids, and its Knights of Zakul were Force users who drew on both light and dark side energies. But it also had extraordinary technology. It had a sense of aesthetic beauty the Sith Empire lacked, and it was ruled by a man who called himself the immortal Emperor Valkorion, who was beloved by his people in a way the Sith Emperor could never be, because Valkorion had done something Vitiate never had. He had built something not to consume, but to inhabit, to experience. He had a family, 3 children, Arkan, Thexan, and Valen. Arkan and Thexan were warriors, brilliant, loyal, devoted to their father, even as Valkorion remained emotionally distant from them in the way of someone who has been alive for 3,000 years and finds it difficult to relate to people who will die in a century. Valen was the most powerful Force user of the 3, so powerful that Valkorion had her trained in techniques to suppress her own power, because he feared what she might become. This fear, like most parental fears rooted in control rather than love, became a self-fulfilling prophecy. When Arkan and Thexan brought a prisoner before their father, a Republic or Sith hero of extraordinary power, the person we'll call the Outlander, Valkorion did something no one expected. He appeared inside the Outlander's mind, offered his power, his knowledge, his immortality, and then let Arkan cut him down. Vitiate/Valkorion did not die. He was too powerful to die from a lightsaber wound, but he allowed himself to be perceived as dead, which triggered exactly the chaos he wanted. Arkan blamed the Outlander for his father's death, took the throne of Zakul for himself, and launched a war of conquest against both the Republic and the Sith Empire simultaneously. The Eternal Fleet, Zakul's warships, powered by a mysterious Force-powered supercomputer called Gemini, was unlike anything either galactic power had ever faced. Faster, more numerous, nearly impossible to destroy, because they could be endlessly reproduced. Both the Republic and the Sith Empire fell to Zakul, not destroyed, subjugated, made to pay tribute, occupied. The galaxy had a new master, and it was wearing the face of a dead man's angry son. The Outlander was frozen in carbonite and kept as Arkan's trophy. For 5 years, 5 years of Zakul's rule, 5 years of the galaxy under the Eternal Throne, 5 years of the Republic and the Sith Empire struggling to survive under occupation. When the Outlander was finally freed by Lana Beniko, a former Sith intelligence officer who had broken from the Empire, and Koth Vortina, a disillusioned Zakulan commander, the galaxy had changed, and Vitiate was still there, inside the Outlander's mind, patient, waiting. The Outlander, free at last, 5 years behind on everything, with a ghost in their head and an empire to fight, began to build something. The Alliance, not the Republic, not the Sith Empire, something new. On the planet Odessen, a world the Outlander had chosen specifically because it was strong in the Force, but in a balanced way, neither light nor dark dominant, a coalition began to form. Jedi who had escaped the occupation, Sith who had broken from the Empire, soldiers, mercenaries, smugglers, and ordinary people who had decided they'd had enough of being conquered. They came from both sides of the Galactic Civil War, united by the common enemy of Zakul. The process of building this alliance was not clean or simple. Old enemies had to work together. Old prejudices had to be set aside, or at least suppressed long enough to get things done. Jedi and Sith, who had spent centuries trying to destroy each other, now sat in the same war councils and tried to agree on strategy. Meanwhile, Arkan ruled Zakul with increasing brutality. His sister Valen, whose Force potential, long suppressed by their father, had been breaking free in increasingly violent ways, was both his most loyal enforcer and his most dangerous liability. She was immensely powerful and deeply traumatized by what her father had done to her. She was, in the most clinical sense, a weapon who had decided she was a person, still working out what that meant. Eventually, Arkan was defeated. His mother, Senya, who had loved her children even as Valkorion grew cold and distant, turned against him, wounded him, and fled with him. In the aftermath of his defeat, Vaylin took the Eternal Throne. Vaylin was, in some ways, worse than Arkan. Arkan had been driven by grief, betrayal, and the desperate need to prove himself to a father who was never capable of approval. Vaylin had been driven past the edge by her conditioning, her imprisonment, and 3 decades of being alternately pampered and tortured by a father who both adored and feared her. She was brilliant, she was charismatic, she was utterly without restraint. And Vitiate, still lurking in the Outlander's mind, still patient, still calculating, saw in her his perfect successor. He had, at some point in his long life, decided that he would ultimately consume Vaylin, that her power would be his next meal. He had been preparing for it for years. The final confrontation with both Vaylin and, ultimately, Vitiate himself came at the Eternal Throne on Zakuul. Vaylin died, and Vitiate, drawn out by the Outlander, manifesting fully for the first time in centuries, was finally, truly, at last destroyed. It had taken 3,000 years, the sacrifice of countless lives, and the combined effort of beings on both sides of every ideological divide the galaxy could produce. But Vitiate, Tenebrae, the immortal emperor, was gone. The Outlander took the Eternal Throne, and the galaxy, exhausted, bleeding, reduced in places to rubble, began once again to think about something it hadn't been able to think about for years: peace. What happened after the defeat of Vitiate and the collapse of the Eternal Empire is, in the broadest strokes, a story of slow recovery. The Eternal Alliance held the Eternal Fleet and the supercomputer Gemini, an unprecedented concentration of military power. What the Outlander chose to do with that power determined the shape of the galaxy for the next century. Some accounts suggest the Alliance was eventually dissolved, its power distributed, the Eternal Fleet dispersed or destroyed, so that no single faction could use it as a weapon of domination. Others suggest it became the foundation of a new galactic order. The details, frustratingly, are lost to the millennia that followed. What we know is that the galaxy stabilized. The Republic recovered, never quite to its former strength, marked permanently by the trauma of conquest, but functional. The Sith Empire, whose story in this era is complicated by the fact that it had been internally riven for decades, before Zakuul ever appeared, fragmented and eventually collapsed into the various Sith cults, dark side orders, and shadow factions that would haunt galactic history for the next 2,000 years. The Jedi Order, too, was changed by the Old Republic era. The order that emerged from the centuries of conflict with the Sith Empire, Zakuul, and the endless parade of dark side threats was more cautious than the one that had entered those conflicts, more aware of its own vulnerabilities, more careful about the emotional bonds it allowed its members to form. Whether this caution was wisdom or trauma-driven overcorrection is a question historians have debated ever since. There were more wars. There always are. The Jedi Sith, War of the New Sith period, roughly 2,000 to 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, is a sprawling, centuries-long conflict that defies easy summary. The Sith, at this point, were not a single unified empire, but a constellation of individual Sith lords, dark side cults, and former Sith imperial factions. each pursuing their own vision of what the galaxy should look like. The Republic and the Jedi fought them for 1,000 years. The Republic was devastated. At its lowest point, it had been reduced to a handful of core worlds. Planets that had been part of the Republic for thousands of years were lost. The Jedi were scattered, hunted, reduced to a remnant. But they survived. And in the end, it was a Sith who saved both the Jedi and arguably the galaxy. His name was Darth Bane. Bane was a Sith Lord of the Republic's dying days. A genuinely brilliant thinker who looked at the 1,000-year war between the Sith and the Republic and understood something that no Sith before him had grasped. The Sith were losing because of the Sith, not because the Jedi were stronger or the Republic was more resilient, but because the fundamental nature of Sith philosophy, everyone competing for power, everyone plotting against everyone else, apprentices killing masters, factions turning on factions, made the Sith structurally incapable of achieving victory. Their self-destructive nature guaranteed their own defeat. Think about it this way. The Republic, for all its flaws, had institutions. It had a Senate that bickered endlessly, but ultimately kept the government functioning. It had a Jedi Order that had disagreements, but maintained a coherent hierarchy and a shared set of values. It had continuity. When a Chancellor died, another was elected. When a Jedi Master died, their knowledge was recorded and their students carried it forward. The Sith had none of this. They had a Dark Lord who was constantly looking over their shoulder for the apprentice who would try to kill them. They had a Dark Council that spent as much energy plotting against each other as against the Republic. They had Sith Lords who hoarded their knowledge jealously, refused to train too many students for fear of being overthrown, and destroyed each other's power bases in petty feuds. Every Sith empire that had ever been built had eventually been destroyed from within. Naga Sadow's empire fell partly because Ludo Kresh attacked him from behind. Exar Kun's Sith fell partly because his followers were turned against each other. The Brotherhood of Darkness, the organization that Bane had served before Ruusan, was a seething nest of mutual hatred, barely contained by its leader. The Sith kept losing because they couldn't stop betraying each other long enough to win. Bane's solution was radical, counterintuitive, and in retrospect, brilliant. One master, one apprentice. No more Sith armies, no more Sith empires, no more grand organizations that inevitably turned on each other. Just two Sith at a time. One to hold power, one to crave it. Strong enough to survive, hidden enough to be overlooked. The rule of two meant accepting, in the short term, that the Sith could never win an open war. You cannot fight the entire Republic and the entire Jedi Order with just two people. But you don't need to, not right away. What you need is time and patience and the willingness to think in decades, in centuries, in the vast patience of the long game. Two Sith hidden would outlast any single Republic government, would see chancellors and senators and Jedi masters come and go, would slowly, carefully, over generations, accumulate the knowledge and the power and the influence needed to strike a killing blow at exactly the right moment. The thought bomb. At the Battle of Ruusan, the final confrontation of the new Sith Wars, the Brotherhood of Darkness, the last major organized Sith faction, detonated a weapon of dark side energy called the thought bomb. It destroyed both Sith and Jedi indiscriminately, consuming the Force spirits of every Force user caught within its range. Bane survived. He had deliberately positioned himself outside the blast. And in the aftermath, with the Brotherhood of Darkness destroyed and the Jedi believing the Sith were finally finished, Bane began to build something new. He took an apprentice, Darth Zana, a young girl he had found at Ruusan, already touched by the dark side through the trauma of the battle. He trained her in the rule of two, and when she grew strong enough, she killed him, as was intended, as was required, and she took an apprentice, and so it went. For 1,000 years, two Sith in the darkness, patient, biding their time, accumulating knowledge, power, influence, working through proxies, manipulating events, steering the galaxy without being seen. The lineage is long and mostly lost to history. Darth Zana, Darth Cognus, Darth Millennial, who briefly tried to establish a rule of three, was swiftly corrected and doesn't appear in many records thereafter. Darth Vectivus, who was so unusual in his methods that historians sometimes question whether he should be counted among the true line of Bane's heirs. Darth Plagueis, who was a scientist as much as a warrior, obsessed with the manipulation of midi-chlorians and the possibility of creating or preventing death. And then Darth Plagueis, who had discovered that the rule of two's great weakness was the constant threat of the apprentice killing the master before passing the knowledge fully on, made the error of letting his guard down just once. He let himself sleep. His apprentice killed him in his sleep. His apprentice, who had been born Palpatine, who had grown up on Naboo, who had joined the Senate with a plan already laid, threads of manipulation already spreading across the galaxy, like a web invisible to everyone who hadn't woven it. His apprentice, who would call himself Darth Sidious, and Darth Sidious was the end of the line, the culmination of 1,000 years of patient planning, the fruit of Bane's radical reimagining of Sith philosophy. The Jedi, believing the Sith destroyed, lowered their guard. They had no idea. The Sith were waiting. One master to embody power, one apprentice to crave it, hidden behind 1,000 years of careful, patient preparation. Until, at last, Darth Sidious looked at the galaxy and decided the time had come. He called himself the Senator from Naboo. He called himself Chancellor Palpatine. He called himself a servant of democracy. He was none of these things. He was the heir to everything Darth Bane had built, everything Darth Revan had sacrificed, everything the ancient Sith of Korriban had dreamed. He was the patient dark, finally showing its face. And then he declared himself Emperor. But that story, that's a different timeline. That's the story we already know. Let's breathe for a moment. We've just traveled through roughly 10,000 years of history, from the Jedi on Tython, finding balance between light and dark on a planet that punished extremes, through the first Sith Empire and the Dark Jedi who built it, through the Hyperspace War and the Golden Age that followed, through the Great Sith War and the burning of Ossus, through the Mandalorian Wars and the tragedy of Revan, a man who tried to protect the galaxy and nearly destroyed it in the process, through the Jedi exile and the wounds left in the Force, through Vitiate and his impossible 3,000-year patience, through all of it. And what does it mean? I think it means that the galaxy was never simply divided into light and dark, into Jedi and Sith, into good and evil. Revan was both a hero and a villain, sometimes simultaneously. Kreia hated the Force and spent her life serving it. Vitiate was an orphan who taught himself to survive through predation and never learned any other way to exist. Nomi Sunrider went from grieving widow to one of the most powerful Jedi who ever lived, through nothing but grief, necessity, and stubborn refusal to give up. The Jedi were right, even if the Jedi forgot it. The Force is not simply light or dark. It is both intention in balance, in the ancient dance of all things that exist. Every great crisis in the Old Republic era, every war, every catastrophe, every moment when civilization nearly fell, came from the same place. From someone deciding that power was more important than people, that strength was more important than wisdom, that winning was more important than being worthy of winning. And every time the galaxy survived, it survived because of the opposite. Because someone, usually exhausted, usually damaged, usually not who you'd have chosen for the role, decided that the people around them mattered more than their own pain or their own power. That is the lesson of 10,000 years. There is something else the Old Republic era teaches us, if we're willing to look at it with clear eyes. Something about institutions. The Jedi Order lasted 25,000 years. That is an almost incomprehensible span of time. It survived the destruction of the Infinite Empire. It survived the Hyperspace War. It survived the Great Sith War, the burning of its libraries and temples, the corruption of thousands of its members. It survived the Mandalorian Wars, the Jedi Civil War, the near extinction of the new Sith Wars. How? Not through perfection. The Jedi Order was not perfect. It made catastrophic mistakes. It was too rigid, too emotionally suppressive, too confident in its own wisdom at moments when humility was what the situation required. It sent Ulic Qel-Droma into the Krath without adequate support. It exiled Mitra Surik instead of helping her heal. It stood aside during the Mandalorian Wars for reasons that were right in principle and disastrous in practice. The Jedi Order survived because it had people in it who cared about it enough to change it, who could see its flaws clearly enough to work against them from the inside, who were willing to be the difficult student, the questioning apprentice, the master who said, "This tradition serves us poorly, and we should examine why we maintain it." And because for every Jedi who fell, there was another who got up. The Republic is the same story. 25,000 years of democratic government, with all its messiness and inefficiency and corruption and glory. Not perfect, never perfect, but persistent, willing to fail and try again, willing to be reformed, revised, reconstituted, rebuilt after each disaster. There is something quietly heroic about an institution that survives not through invincibility, but through refusing to permanently give up. We could stand to remember that. Wanted generations after him. Exar Kun, who could have been the greatest Jedi of his age, and chose instead to be the greatest catastrophe. Nomi Sunrider, standing in the wreckage of the life she'd planned and choosing every day to get up and fight. Revan, who contained multitudes, hero and villain, light and dark, memory and identity, and who spent centuries as a prisoner, refusing to let the darkness take the last of him. Mitra Surik, carrying the weight of Malachor Fem with her everywhere she went, and still choosing to help. Vitiate, 3,000 years old, and still unable to fill the void inside him no matter how many worlds he consumed. All of them making choices, all of them living with the consequences. The galaxy of the Old Republic was not simpler than our own. If anything, it was more complicated, more layered, more ancient, more steeped in history and consequence and the long shadow of the past. But it was also more beautiful for it. There is something deeply comforting about a galaxy that has survived 10,000 years of its own worst impulses, that has been cracked and burned and frozen and broken, and has always, somehow, gotten back up. That still has Jedi in it, still has the Republic, still has people, humans and Twi'leks and Togruta and Wookiees and dozens of others, who get up in the morning and choose to do good in a galaxy that makes it very difficult to do so. The Force flows through all living things. It was flowing 10,000 years before the Battle of Yavin in the temples of Tython. It was flowing when the Great Sith War burned Ossus. It was flowing when Revan, amnesiac and confused, first learned to reach out and feel it again, as though for the first time. It is flowing now, and somewhere in the galaxy, in this galaxy, in the real one, the one you are lying in right now, it is moving through you too. Music fades to the very edge of hearing. Sleep well. The Force is with you, always.